Sigurd had finally killed the dragon. He was so proud of himself, and yet he was just done. He felt dirty. And Fafnir was a dwarf who became a dragon because he was so evil. But he was so nasty that Sigurd felt like his soul had been dragged through slime or someone's midden. He needed a palate cleanser. He's thinking this, of course, while he's getting the dragon ready to take to sorcerers and fighters. You don't want to leave your kill behind. You never waste your kill. And sorceresses really love dragon blood. Warriors want the scales for shields. And the kids just like them because they're cool. They're the best party favor ever. You wouldn't want to eat dragon meat, though, because then you become one with the dragon, and Fafnir was an evil, cruel bastard of a dragon. So as Sigurd started back to his homehold, dragging a wagon load of dragon parts behind him, he knew his cousins wanted those claws something fierce for knives. And he tried to think of every heroic thing he could do over the winter. But he didn't want to fight a monster. Monsters, again, just loved you feeling dirty and nasty. He wanted a palate cleanser. He wanted an adventure that made him feel like a hero, not like a garbage collector. So he thought about it as he's trudging and the snow is getting higher and higher because winter is settling in for good. Soon the passes would be unpassable. And he was thinking and thinking and thinking. And then he remembered a story from when he was a teenager. When he was a 12-year-old boy, the skalds had told stories about this beautiful woman imprisoned in fire. Sigurd couldn't remember much of the tales because when you're a 13-year-old boy, all you hear is beautiful woman imprisoned in fire. So when Sigurd got to his homehold, there was feasting, there was exclaiming. People were so glad about the dragon. They called him in, they fed him the best food, and of course there was mead. There's always mead. And as the night started winding down and bellies were full and the women had cleaned up and everybody was on their second or third glass of mead, Sigurd dug deep inside him for courage. And he said, "Do you guys remember that story about the woman in fire?" Everybody goes, "Oh yeah, that was a really popular story about 10 years ago." He said, "Do you guys remember the stories?" And everybody had a version. There were so many versions, and he tried to remember them all. Some of them made her out to be an evil sorceress who's out to rule the world. Others made her out to be a warrior woman. Some said she was imprisoned by her husband because he found a better mistress. Others said she was cursed by Odin. There were so many varieties of this tale, he didn't know what kind of woman he would be getting. But it did make him more intrigued. It made her more interesting. He really wanted to meet her. He kind of hoped that she'd be beautiful and fall in love with him and they could live happily ever after. But he had a sneaking suspicion that she was an evil sorceress and he might have to take care of her. That would not necessarily make him feel better. But a hero does what a hero has to do. So then he goes, "Anybody know where this woman might be? Which direction I should go to find the flames?" And they thought about it, had more mead and more mead and more mead. And finally, the older members of the holding said, "You know what? We go Viking west and south. That's where we go for treasure, for land, for adventure. When you go looking for monsters, you go north. And when you go looking for tales, you go east. This woman's both, so why don't you go northeast and maybe you'll find her?" Well, Sigurd stuck around the holding, flirted with the girls, played with the kids, rested up because he was pretty sore after fighting Fafnir and after getting beaten to a pulp. Then he packed up his wagon, headed out. He headed to the next holding, where pretty much the same thing happened. They wanted to hear his story about the dragon. They wanted to hear all about it, what he learned, and did he have any extra scales for shields. And the kids were really excited about the little bitty scales that were toys. And then they told him their tales of the woman in fire. And there were more tales he hadn't heard, and he committed them to memory. And with every tale, he was more and more intrigued and more interested and more convinced that this is what he needed to do. But again, winter was coming on, so you didn't know what was going to happen. You could get snowed into a holding, or you could get snowed in with the dragon. You never knew. So he asked them where they thought the woman would be. Nobody had any idea, but they thought that his home holding had a good idea. And again, perhaps heading northeast would be the way to go. So he headed northeast. He went over mountains and he forded fords. He borrowed boats to sail across lakes. He talked to people until he couldn't talk anymore and told them his tales and they told him theirs. And with every tale they told about the woman, he was more and more interested until she was all he could think about. And nobody had any idea where to find her, but they agreed that maybe north and east would be the best way to go. So he went up and down the Daneland looking for a hold that had information, or maybe trying to smell smoke and find where she is that way. But the only smoke he found was the smoke in holdings. Some of it smelled like meat, some of it smelled like wood, a lot of it smelled like wet dog, but it was winter. So he kept up and down the mountains until finally he wasn't finding holdings and he wasn't smelling smoke and he didn't see any broken snow. And he thought, I think I ran out of places to go. But he decided to go another couple days looking, and then he was trying to hole up for a couple days and recuperate from the cold. Well, he came across a holding. There was a small holding. They were so excited to see him, he couldn't believe it. Turns out the only people who stopped by were relatives and people who owed them money, or who they owed money more often than not. So he went in the hold and shared his stories with them, and they were excited. They were a very well-stocked hold because they didn't know if their spring would last a couple weeks or a month. But it was short, and they knew the winter would be long. So they were stocked up. So Sigurd helped them with some chores, helped fix some things, gave some strength where it was needed, and sat down for a feast. And the mead, oh, the mead was delicious. It was a cold brewed mead. Some people made their mead like wine, and some people made it like beer. This was a combination of the best of both. So the first night, they all told stories. He was kind of a coward, and since it was his last hold, he was afraid they too would say they had no idea where this woman was. So he didn't contribute anything, and he didn't ask about the woman. The second night was a little better. Halfway through the feasting and the partying and the drinking, he asked if they remembered the stories. They thought about it a bit and then said, yeah. And they brought out new stories. He had lost count of how many stories he had heard about this woman. But at this point, he thought, you know what? I might be a little bit in love with her. I just hope she lives up to the stories, because if she's completely different, I'll have to actually get to know her. That's a terrifying thing for a man. When you get to know a woman, she becomes important. You want to listen to her. And warriors do not like to listen to women. So as the people in the holding told their tales about the woman, he noticed a couple of the old women not joining in and not really drinking either. And they looked him over like you would look over the first boy who tries to date your daughter. They looked him up and down, and upside right and upside down. Every once in a while, they'd ask him a question. So as the night goes on, he goes, do you guys have any idea where I could find this woman? And the old women just laughed and laughed, and then they went to bed. Sigurd kind of figured this wasn't the end of everything. So the next night, he asked again, and they told more stories. And then the oldest woman with the thinnest skin, she was literally just muscle and sinew, and the skin was so thin you could see her blood pulsing in her arms. But her eyes were sharp blue, and she moved so fast you would think that she was a much younger woman, except she looked pretty old. She looked at me and said, what do you want a woman like that for? What are you going to do with her? And Sigurd goes, I just want to find her. I just want to see if the stories are real. The woman just rolls her eyes and says, you want to know about a mystery woman? Just talk to the next woman sitting next to you. And she rolled her eyes and stomped out of the hall and went to bed. Sigurd didn't know why she was upset. A beautiful woman's a beautiful woman. If you're lucky, you get to know them. If you don't, you just sit and stare. He didn't want to be one of the ones who sat and stared. So the next night, he was determined he was going to get the women to tell him where this woman was, if they knew. And again, the women said, so what are you going to do with her when you find her? And he says, I'm going to find out if she's an evil sorceress or if she just needs someone to rescue her. And then the women really laughed. They laughed so hard, one of them snorted mead out of her nose. And then they rolled their hands at him and walked away and went to bed. Sigured was getting tired of this. He was used to people taking him seriously. He was a warrior, damn it. He was a Viking. He was used to going on boats and going against monsters. So the next night, Sigured was really determined to get an answer. So the women ask him again, what are you going to do with her if you get her? And the old woman said, why do you want her? What do you want her for? Have you thought it through? If you do rescue this woman, do you have a plan? Do you have a way to take care of a woman like this? Are you going to take her to her family? Are you going to commit time? And he just had no answer. All he could think of was, I just want to see if she's pretty. And that was not the right answer. The women didn't laugh this time. They just humphed and walked away. Sigured felt like his welcome at the holding was wearing out. Most of the women would look at him side-eyed. So he figured he had one last chance to pull this out of there. So that night, they told their stories. They had run out of stories on the beautiful woman, but there are other stories. And he goes, do you know where I could find this woman in the fire? And the oldest woman just sat and stared at him for the longest time. And she goes, Sigured. And his heart kind of stopped and he held his breath. And he held his breath a long time because she just stared at him deep, penetrating with those eyes, didn't move a muscle. And he had never seen her sit still. And he goes, what are you going to do with her when you find her? Sigured figured he'd better tell the truth. He goes, I think I might be a little bit in love with her. I'd like to find out. If I'm not, I'd like to make her life better. So the old woman looked at him and said, I'll tell you what. The woman that you're looking for is over 2 fjords, up a mountain, down a valley, and halfway up the second mountain, there's a plateau. There's a meadow there. You'll find flames there and a beautiful woman. And then she laughed. She said, but there's a storm coming on and I might just be fucking with you. Sigured looked at her and he well and truly believed she did not tell him the truth if she knew. And the other women laughed and laughed and the girls laughed and the boys started laughing. And soon everybody was laughing and Sigured wasn't sure if they were laughing with him or at him, but he didn't care because he had an answer. So he packed up that next morning. He had a little bit of a hangover from drinking too much, but he figured that would clear up under the sunshine and in the cold. And he had some water, took off, left his cart, just took a pack with him, crossed 2 fjords, went up a mountain, down a mountain, and halfway up the next mountain, he found a plateau. He was kind of bemused. He was sure she was completely messing with him. And then he thought, no, you know what? She is so ornery. She probably told me there was a plateau there and there'll be nothing there. So he finally gets to the plateau and he starts smelling snowdrops. He thinks he sees crocuses. There are birds in the trees. It is the middle of the winter. Like the days have just started getting longer. And Sigurd's thinking, this isn't right. And then he hears crackling. He doesn't smell smoke at all. He just hears crackling. And he walks a little farther in, and through the trees, he sees white-blue flames 9 feet tall. And briefly he thought, I'm just going to jump over them and see what's on the other side. And then he looked at the flames and realized those walls of flame were easily a foot thick. He had another brief thought that maybe he could put wood over it and use it as a bridge, and then he realized that as hot as those flames are, everything would just go up in flames. And he remembered a lot of the tales that he was told said you could only cross the flames if you were the bravest man in the world. Sigurd knew he was brave. He'd killed a dragon, killed a lot of things. He didn't know if he was the bravest man in the world. He had never had to face a child dying. He had never had to look in his mother's eyes and see that she was disappointed in him. And those things he was afraid of. But he wasn't afraid of flames. So he got a running start, jumped as high as he could, sent the butt of his pants, and landed hard and went into a roll. His foot tapped something, and he looked, and there's this beautiful woman laying there. She's sound asleep. For a minute, he didn't know what to do. He just looked at her. She was gorgeous. She was everything you could ever want in a woman. And she was wearing armor and clutching a sword on her chest so tight her fingers were white. He thinks to himself, truly, this is a bride for a warrior. Well, he wanted to wake her up because looking at someone beautiful doesn't do you any good. You want to actually get to know them, they have to talk. But he does look at her until he's satisfied with that because, once you wake her up, she is going to talk. And so he patted her on the foot and nothing happened. He went and he flicked her foot and nothing happened. Took a shoe and a sock off, tickled her foot, nothing happened. He's feeling really stupid by this point, so he puts the sock and shoe back on. He goes up and shakes her shoulder, shakes both shoulders, nothing happens. He remembered a tale where you kiss a woman and she wakes up, and he wasn't sure about this because the woman's holding a sword. Sounds like a good way to get killed. But he walks up to her, apologizes for kissing her without her consent, and kisses her. Sigurd kisses her gently and tentatively, and next thing he knows, he is on his back and everything goes black. He looks up and there's these two blue eyes looking at him with fury, and there's a knife at his throat. The woman's demanding, "Who do you think you are? What do you think you're doing? The very least you should do is ask for my permission." And he tried to explain how she was asleep and he couldn't wake her up. She was not hearing any of it. She pulled her sword out and gestured for him to pull hers, and they fought. It was fierce. Sigurd could have easily beaten any of the guys he grew up with. He thinks he could have beaten most of the guys in the holds he visited, but this woman was fierce and she was giving him no quarter. She wasn't even trying not to hurt him. Finally, the two take a rest. Sigurd's holding his sword over his shoulder. Brunhild's leaning on hers. And he said, "So what's your name?" And they start chatting. And as they chat, she becomes less and less angry with him. But she doesn't trust him, not by a long shot. And so they sit down on the ground. He pulls some food out of his bag. He realized it was really stupid to jump over the fire with his full bag when it could have caught fire and he would have lost everything. But Sigurd doesn't think things through very much. So he pulled out some food, shared it with her, gave her some mead. They talked for a long time. They might have been a little bit drunk, but they had a good talk. And Sigurd goes, "I think I'm in love with you. Will you have me for your husband?" And she looked at him. He hadn't beaten her. He had crossed the fire, and only the bravest man could cross the fire. And she was not having anyone other than the bravest, because she was a Valkyrie. She had stood up to Odin. She was not backing down. Brunhild looked at Sigurd and thought, if I have to get married, I might as well marry this one. At least he's not like most men. He's not a coward. I can live with that. I can work with that. I can scare the crap out of that.